Good afternoon. Senator Schumer and I just had a meeting to discuss the Florida recount, and so we'll just be making a statement here as the legal proceedings are ongoing. This process is about one thing: making sure that every legal ballot is counted and protecting the right of every Floridian to participate in our democracy. And that is to have their ballot counted and to count as they intended it. Sadly, it's become clear that my opponent isn't interested in making sure that every lawful vote is counted. Instead, he's been using his power as governor to try to undermine the voting process. He's thrown around words like voter fraud with no proof. He's tried to get the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to intimidate local supervisors of election. Both the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, which Governor Scott oversees, and the Governor Scott appointed Florida Secretary of State have both said that there is no credible evidence of voter fraud. It's become obvious that Mr. Scott cannot oversee the process in a fair and impartial way, and he should remove himself from the recount process. People must have confidence in the integrity of the election. It remains the most important goal to make sure that every lawful vote be counted correctly. We will work to see that the recount is conducted fairly and that the rule of law is followed. Senator Schumer.
Well, thank you, Senator Nelson, and thank everybody for joining us here today. As Senator Nelson mentioned, we'll just be making a statement at this point while the legal proceedings are ongoing. Now, the more time that passes since Election Day, the better things keep looking for Democrats. A few hours ago, I met with the women of the West, Senators-elect Jackie Rosen and Kyrsten Sinema. Just now, Senator Nelson was here to brief me on how things are going with the Florida vote count. And following that meeting, I want to make three simple points. First, it is a bedrock principle of our democracy that every vote is counted. And the Senate election in Florida must abide by that rule. Every single Florida voter, whether they mailed in their ballot, whether they showed up at the polls on Election Day to vote, no matter for whom they legally cast their vote, must have their vote counted. The hallmark of our democracy is simple. Every vote must count. That's what Democrats believe, and that's what we're trying to get done. President Trump and Governor Scott seem dead set against counting every vote. Why? Because they're worried that if every vote is counted, Bill Nelson will be reelected as senator from the great state of Florida. Trump and Scott are attempting to bully the election officials in Florida out of doing their jobs in an attempt to win this election. It's just plain wrong. It's un-American. Attempts to bully, threaten, and cajole officials into not counting every vote is a large and dangerous step away from the democracy we all cherish. Trump and Scott must stop now. Donald Trump wants to rush the election and not let all the votes be counted. He said Bill Nelson should concede. Before everyone's vote is counted, what is he afraid of? If he really wants an honest and fair election, President Trump will stop bullying, harassing, and lying about the vote in Florida and let the election proceed without the heavy hand of the president tipping the scales of justice. Right now, the state of Florida has a Sunday deadline for the hand recount. This rule stems from the 2000 Bush v. Gore recount and was put in place because the recount in 2000 was in danger of taking so long that the Electoral College would meet without knowing Florida's results. Fortunately, with the Senate race, there is no Electoral College. That means supervisors of the elections should have all the time they need to count every Floridian's ballot to make sure the candidate with the most votes is actually seated in January, even if the vote count has to go beyond Sunday. Now, second, Senator Nelson just said it, I've said it, and we'll say it again. Governor Scott needs to recuse himself from any involvement in the recount and do it now. He's a contestant in this election and can't possibly be trusted to be a neutral and fair arbiter as the votes are tallied. In Georgia, Secretary of State Brian Kemp even stepped aside for this very reason. Any contestant in an election can't have a thumb on the scale while votes are being counted. And it's not just that Governor Scott appears to be conflicted. He's said and done things that show, without any doubt, how conflicted he is. He alleged voter fraud, where his own officials that he appointed said there was none. He's attempted to direct state resources to stop vote counting in locations that he knows favors Democrats. Just contrast the way Governor Scott is handling this with how the Republican governor and officials in Arizona conducted themselves. Governor Ducey, a Republican, said, "Every vote matters," and the Arizona Senate race is proof, so let's get this right. All legally cast votes must be counted. When you vote by mail, it may take a while. Ballots come in up to Election Day, 7 p.m. But those votes are just as valid as those that came in earlier. And if it takes a little while to count them we must. That's what democracy demands. And the Republican Secretary of State in Arizona explained why the process there took longer and how important it was the election results be accurate, even if it takes a few extra days. That's just what Florida officials should do. Florida GOP officials should follow the lead of their friends in Arizona and count every vote fairly, no matter what the outcome. That's what democracy means. Governor Scott needs to recuse himself. It needs to happen now. Now, lastly, why are we seeing this campaign of falsehoods, outlandish claims of voter fraud, and the bullying of election officials? Because Republicans know that if this recount is conducted fairly and thoroughly, Senator Nelson has an excellent chance of being reelected. We Democrats are prepared to live with the verdict of the Florida voters. But the Republicans seem to be doing everything they can to stifle the voice of Florida voters. If this is done fair and square, we believe Senator Nelson has an excellent chance, a much greater than half chance, of being reelected. We will not have a rerun of 2000, when bullying and intimidation ruled and created a rush to judgment, so that to this day, many Americans believe that election was unfairly decided. That cannot happen again. Thank you.
Why can't you answer questions? Shut up, Frank.